continuation to play right now. Well, of course, obviously we can say he's not surprised at all.
No.
It's not.
It would be very difficult to be surprised. And the Petrov is Fabiano's main weapon, and it was also included in the video.
Well, they also had a game this summer in the Petrov, where actually Magnus had a better position, very, very promising position, but he couldn't collect the full point.
That was a very strange game from the Sinkfield Cup this August, where Magnus had this really promising advantage, and suddenly Fabiano found some very precise defensive moves, such as knight, king h8, knight g8 was the plan in that game. If you have seen the game, I'm sure you remember that it looked so weird for black, but it managed to hold the position together.
On the other hand, now in move 3, knight d3 was made, which is a very unusual move. Knight f3 is the most common move, and also knight c4. So definitely just to understand, I mean, on knight f3 move, here just instead of knight d3 there were more than 35,000 games, and on knight d3 there are definitely much less. So it's a great surprise for me also to play knight d3. There are very, very few games. But of course even good grandmasters are playing it. Probably knight e4. Yes, sorry, we have quite a few moves already. Black took knight e4, of course, taking back the pawn. Queen e2. In the meantime, I want to check it also, that what are the moves, the theory goes. Of course, queen e7 is a must play, and knight f4. Yeah, White's plan is very straightforward. Of course, he wants to go knight d5. This is the primary idea of knight f4, but also soon, if black is going to defend that, White will develop with his pawn to d3 and then develop. I think actually it's kind of a logical choice by Magnus to go for e4. And so now after knight f4, black has different options. Of course, he has to deal with the threat of knight d5. So knight f6 is a move which is kind of maybe the most natural. Also, black can go c6, but it means that he already commits himself, that maybe he's not happy, because many times black is going, let's say, knight f6, and later on he develops with his knight to c6, not to d7. So it's a matter of principle, strategic question, whether he's going to go knight f6 or c6. Well, it also means that, of course, I think we're going to see a long game. It's going to be a maneuvering game. It's going to be positional mainly. It's going to be a slow development in this game. But on the other hand, I think for Magnus it is a good choice, to be honest, because
the knight d3 variation.
This variation to go for this kind of solid position, because he, as we saw in different positions, he can create difficulties out of almost nothing. And also with Fabiano, I saw in the previous game, for example, while we were discussing around move 20, that black can take the initiative. And Fabiano, in the press conference, was absolutely, he was convinced that, well, he had no problem. It's he was who was hesitating how to continue. And he absolutely gave the impression as he was the one possibly to play for whether he has something more than equalish or not. So he was kind of, I think, a little bit more, he was a little bit more optimistic than
what
the position
was
suggesting. And of course, Magnus was very happy with his position, and he was extremely comfortable with the initiative he had and created. So I think from this point of view, it can go in a way that that White can create something without people noticing it, and eventually Black has an unpleasant situation, because that was exactly the scenario in the summer. It was a Sinkfield Club, or
yes, at the Sinkfield Cup. Sorry, Judith, I need to interrupt you because Fabiano didn't play knight f6 nor pawn to c6. He went knight c6.
C6.
Which I don't
Wow.
see any
So-
other game in the database for. Do you have any?
No, I had 2 games only after knight f6.
I see the same. So I had 3 games for this position: knight f6 or pawn to c6. Knight c6 seems to be a novelty.
Yeah, the idea is, I guess, immediately if knight d5, which I was mentioning, that this is the plan for white. Black would be going queen e5, knight takes c7, king goes out, attacking the knight, and if simply knight a8, I guess knight d4, and then some great surprises in the air from black side. So white has to go something like queen d3, and then black would be winning the queen already. I guess knight c5, knight c2. So actually black would win already. It's only move 11. So this is the reason knight d5, knight c7 is not possible. Of course, here after knight e5, knight c3 would be something to consider. And but immediately white cannot gain material. This is for sure. Let's see what happens if white goes simply d3. I'm wondering if knight d4 can be considered, and after queen e4, let's say queen takes e4, d takes e4, knight c2, king d1, knight a1, and then I think b3, and then bishop d2, bishop b2 and grabbing the knight. At first glance, it seems like black is not going to save his knight, even though black can try to play bishop e7 with the idea to defend the knight after bishop b2 with bishop f6. But I think, for example, after bishop e7, knight d5 can be a move. But of course, we have to look at it later on longer, and knight d5
Knight d5,
was
we are
played.
entering the most critical variation. Judith,
Extremely interesting.
Judith, I
it's
thought
such
we were expecting a maneuvering long game, but I'm glad it's not the case.
And actually, knight d4 was played instantly.
Wow.
So it's like, wow.
It's super preparation and the trade of queens. Most
Yeah.
normal.
Well, not in a very, very boring way, I must say. But we ended up, in a very interesting way of exchanging queens.
Both knights are hanging.
Well,
on
the
E3
question
and
is
E2.
whether can white play knight d5 back. Probably black goes, well, the question is whether black goes back to d4 or grabs the bishop. How does this work? If knight c1, knight takes c7, king goes out, knight a8. It's definitely not a natural knight placements, what we see here.
Knight
But I
d5
think
is on
here,
the board.
Wow. Wow.
Well,
They made sure that we have the entertainment for today.
indeed, and I think they also want to clarify that the Petrov is not boring. I'm still
is
in
great
shock,
fun.
basically. The knight d3 variation and the knight c6, which was never played. The knight goes back to d4.
Yeah,
It's the
knight
most
d4.
natural game in the world. Same position as before, but now without the queens. Knight a3,
Knight
defending the
a3.
c2 pawn.
Well, it's also not the most obvious move, because there was another way of defending it with bishop d3, which after black would go knight c5, I guess, and if after knight c7 king goes out, white would take on d3 on a8. Black grabs, knight takes d3, takes knight c2, king d1, knight takes a1. And then both of the knights are in the corner, and none of them will be able to escape. But probably black should be completely fine. Actually, as after b3, I guess bishop e6 looks like a promising move. So after bishop b2, black can get 2 pawns for the knight. And but okay, let's go back to the position where we stopped.